You're lucky. Well, I think we were doing this mainly for the recording. So if we can go around the room and introduce ourselves, I'll start out. I'm Bob Currick. I'm elected the chair of this committee, and I'm from Palermo.
I'm Doug Thomas from Montville.
I'm Wesley Norton and I serve as a select board member in Pierceport.
Robin Tarantino from Lincolnville.
Herb Condon from Waldo.
Elizabeth Lenhart, Stockton Springs.
Mary Mortier, Belfast.
Okay, great. We do have a set of minutes. They're missing so somebody making a motion in a second. And I was wondering if anybody remembered exactly, or if we don't remember exactly, we can ask.
I think I seconded it.
I think you did too.
I don't remember. What
Tim,
was it, Tim?
I think so.
I think so.
Okay.
It was Tim.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as amended.
So moved.
Second.
All right, got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? All right,
I'll abstain from that.
Understood.
okay.
Thank you very
No
much.
problem. All right, so let's get right on. We're first is Sharon Peavy with probate.
Good evening.
Hi, Sharon. That's 1070. Okay, go ahead.
So you may have noticed, my budget has decreased from last year. If you take out the personnel services line, my overall budget has decreased about $3,900. And the biggest reason for that decrease is our court appointments line. What I asked for this year, was really a guess. We had to increase our court appointment fee to $150 an hour. And it was hard to gauge how much that was gonna cost for this year. I'm projecting we're gonna spend about $25,000 this year for that court appointments line. So I did decrease it down to $26,000 for next year.
Could you just kind of tell us what court appointments are and how they work?
Yes, it's for people who are indigent that appear in our court. A lot of parents of minors in guardianship proceedings who can't afford to pay for an attorney. It also helps pay for a guardian ad litem, which is a person that's appointed on behalf of the child to speak for the child and have a voice for the child in court. It's statutory that the court has to appoint an attorney for any parent that cannot afford one in the proceedings, so.
Okay,
We do try to recoup some of that money by putting parents on a payment plan. If they can afford to pay $20 a month, we'll take $20 a month. Most of the time, the court absorbs the cost.
now is it anything that you said most of the time the court absorbs the cost?
Yeah. We collect about $3,000 back in restitution,
I was gonna say, Sharon, you generate revenue
and we
also.
do generate
Yep.
revenue as well. Yeah.
It seemed like the run rate to me on the court appointments was about $15,000 a year in the last few years. And
That's when we were paying $50 an hour.
oh, $50
And
an
we
hour.
increased that to $150 an hour to be competitive with the state rate. That's what the state pays in district court. And it's hard to pull attorneys from district court for $50 an hour when they can get $150 at the state rate.
So you're not gonna give me $6,000 more? Just checking. And I understand your explanation.
Thank you.
I just didn't, I was curious of why, if we were running at $15,000 a year, why we now why it's up as high as it is.
We were fortunate to be able to keep attorneys working for us for $50 an hour for about 12 years.
Okay, great.
Sharon, how much do you generate in revenue with passports and stuff?
Oh,
I didn't mean to put you on the
I
spot.
know,
I think
you
it's,
did. It's a lot. We do a lot of passport. I don't know if Carrie's listening, if she's got a number she could pull real quick.
I do not.
Okay. For every passport application that we execute, it's a $35 fee that the county collects. We also take photos and that's an extra $15. So we're taking in about $50 per application when we do the photos as well.
How many would you say you do?
Oh. About 800 a year.
800 a year? All right, what is your capital outlay for?
Capital outlay is anything that's not covered under a line item. It helps pay for technology, software that is used strictly in the probate court. Like our docketing system through Catalyst, that's a $3,000 fee per year. We also have a new subscription fees, QuickBooks for our bookkeeping system in the office. And that I believe is around $300 a year now. And it will also pay for any equipment if we need a new scanner. Right now, each of us, we have 4 scanners in our office, and that's to be able to, that allows us to scan documents into our docket management system, which is all available online for the public.
All right, and I have a silly question.
Good, I'm good at those.
Okay, so last year we talked about fixing the judge's chair because it was broken. Did you guys ever fix that?
We did, we were able to get a new one.
Okay.
Yes, she's very comfortable with it.
And another silly question. Your PO box is $300, but the registry of deeds PO box is $460.
They may have a bigger, ours is just a little square, and I'm not sure.
We get a lot of mail for deed recordings and whatnot, so we have a big box, and sometimes that would be full.
Those are the questions I
Yeah.
had.
Question.
And other questions from the committee for,
Well, my only question was last year, and maybe I just took notes wrong, but I had down that part of the capital outlay was QuickBooks.
Mhm.
But then the notes this year under the statutes and reference books says that that increase is partly due to QuickBooks. And you just mentioned QuickBooks and capital outlay, so I just wondered
Where am I
why it's
gonna
in
take it
2
from?
lines. Yeah,
Well-
just why it's in 2 lines, I guess.
Well, it shouldn't be. I think I took it out of capital outlay for this year because that was a new fee. But it very well could come out of the subscriptions line. I'm not sure if that's really the proper place for it though. That's probably a good question for Carrie. To see where it would be better taken out of.
But it's not in both places, you're saying it's.
It shouldn't be in both places. It should be in the capital outlay, which is software specific to our office, is where that should come from.
further questions?
I have a question about the revenues. So on our revenue sheet, there's 2 line items, one for the restitution, which that was a great explanation of. And then the other is for just a probate court revenue that's projected this year at 160K. Is that probate court fees, or is that also some of the processing costs for passports and so forth?
Yes, that's all the revenue that we bring in, whether it be filing fees when an estate is filed. We collect a filing fee when a guardianship, adoption, any proceeding that's filed with us, there's a filing fee. With notice costs, there's the fees that we collect on everything that's filed, and that doesn't include passport.
Yeah, okay, so there it all gets rolled into that.
Yes.
Great, thank you.
All right, any other questions? I'll entertain a motion. Someone. Good. Oh, I guess I should have said, I'll entertain a motion to approve budget center 1070 at 329,835. So moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor? All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're on to the 1065 registry of deed,
I should go here or there.
wherever you want, wherever you feel comfortable.
Okay.
Oh, you don't want to get close to us, huh?
She's being nice to us since we're sitting with
Oh,
her back to
God,
us.
yeah,
Hi, I'm Stacy Grant, the Register of Deeds. And I'm gonna start out by the 2024 revenue that we've taken in so far this year between our fees and our transfer tax is a little over $313,000, which is a little over 33,000 more than we had taken in this time last year. So we are ahead of where we were last year as far as reporting fees and transfer tax. Actually, last month, I think I've taken in the most transfer tax that I have ever taken in a month, so that
Wow.
was really good. And our projected revenue for this year is 390,000, so I think we're gonna be pretty close to that this year. And as far as the budget. The only increases that I have, for this year would be the 3% cost of living and personnel. I did take out line 4940, which was monitoring alarm leases. That will now be coming out of the facilities budget with the rest of the building for the panic buttons.
I had a question about microfilming.
Yes,
Yeah, we've spent 37,744 as of last time. I'm not sure where we are exactly right now. We 37,744 in 2023,
yeah,
and we spent 21,763 so far year to date.
August. It was
But
August.
It's August.
August, but you're asking for
It's
56.
so what this line is, so the balance that we have right now is a little over 24,000. I think I've had a couple go out since, what we have maybe. But I have 3 more payments that are gonna need to be paid by the end of the year, which will be around another 15,000. So that will leave it between 8,000 to 9,000. What this line is we have an IQS recording system. We process all of our documents through that system. And there's a fee of $3.90 per document that we pay our vendor
Mhm.
for the service. We have all of our electronics, all of our computers, the whole system. So out of that $3.90 we pay them, we generate revenue. We generate $22 for the first page and $2 for each additional page for the recording fee. So out of that recording fee, only $3.90 per document gets paid for the system.
Mhm.
So we never know from year to year if, because I did cut it by a lot last year. It went from 64,800 to 56,000. Back in 2022, we were extremely busy with all of the house sales and whatnot. So back then I would have depleted this. I cut it last year to that biggest year that we had to make sure we have the funding in here for our system.
Mhm.
But from year to year, you just don't know. Last year, we didn't record as much. There weren't as many houses on the market. The interest rates are sky high, so we're not getting the refinances. But my thought is if the interest rate or when the interest rate hopefully starts dropping, we'll get those refinances again and we'll have a big year on mortgages.
Big year.
Which I do recall that several years ago, we had a refinance in the year, so. It's just the whole circle,
Gotcha.
you know.
Now, how do the revenues get reflected against these expenses? Yeah, I see the revenues.
So I mean, any money that comes into the county goes into the general fund.
Right.
But it's clearly stated in the proposed or the assumed revenue that she's going to bring in. So it doesn't specifically go to her or go against her budget.
Do we reflect that in the total summary somehow, the revenue? I can't remember.
In the budget summary or the revenue summary?
But some,
In the projected revenue,
No, the budget summary is just the expenditures and the revenues.
so we don't reflect that money coming in against the expenses at all?
no.
No.
Carrie, Eric, can you hear me? She's eating supper. No, I'm gonna, and I hope I'm not speaking out of turn for her, but I mean, it would almost be too hard. It's too large an organization for everything that comes into the county that from the registry of deeds or probate or any of those that generate any revenue. It just goes into the general fund. I mean, Carrie has accounts that reflect all.
So when
this.
you charge our towns, you take the budget and you reduce it by the revenues?
No,
No,
No.
there you are.
I am not eating supper. I'm listening. I couldn't unmute my computer. Sorry. The revenues are not reflected in any of the budget lines. It is, so when I send you the request or for payments, that's not factoring in any revenue the county receives. So if you have a $13 million budget in front of you, we're asking for $13 million. We're not deducting any revenue.
Should we be?
Can you repeat that?
I just said, should we be reflecting the revenue as a reduction of the expenses that get charged to the towns?
Right,
I mean, like offset receipts.
yeah.
Well, that's interesting because the county can only hold in its coffers a percentage of what our budget is, unlike a city or a municipality that can retain it as much as they want in their coffers. We're limited to how much we have. Generally, any additional revenue that we have at the end of the year that's generated that isn't, paid out, is how we're able to fund our reserves that we have. You'll see that there's lists of reserves. Historically, in the past, we had to come to the budget committee for everything on the reserves, and this is one of the ways we've managed to do it.
Do you happen to know what that percentage is that the county is limited to hold in
Carrie, is
surplus?
it 10% of our budget?
Oh, I thought it was less than that.
Yeah,
I
think
thought it was less than that.
it might be 6 or 8, but it's significantly lower. I mean, we're not in the business to make money, you
Right.
know what I mean? But we still need a reserve or something aside. We are debt free. Your county is debt free,
Right.
which is something that most counties can't say.
Mhm.
And Stacy,
So tell me how it works then. If you have more than your 3%, how do you handle that? Or have you ever had that problem?
I think,
Is that the
no,
problem?
Bill, you remember, wasn't there one year, I think that we went over and we gave back, we were
You had
over
to
by
give
like
back.
$56,000. And we had to split the $56,000 up amongst
The way you
all,
split the expense.
all of the towns, 23 towns.
26.
So you're limited to how much you can have,
Yes,
okay, up to some percentage of your total budget.
yes,
And anything in excess of that needs to be rebated to the towns, basically. But you don't count the revenues as a reduction of your budget expenses.
Right,
Okay,
So it's the budget amount plus the revenue
right.
that.
I'm sorry, we kind of got a little bit off the subject, but you're a moneymaker and,
she is, her department is the moneymaker.
okay.
But it does seem like, I mean, the projected revenues from the deeds, the fees are projected to be lower this year, so it seems like we could possibly reduce that line item somewhat more this year.
The microfilming, you mean? The microfilming line?
Yeah, I guess it's not really no, in my brain through this conversation, I was back to thinking it was
So,
more related to fees, but.
no, I don't mean to derail us, but revenues come in, you use those revenues to fund reserves. The reserves are, when you look at your balance in your reserves, that's the percentage that you're not allowed to exceed a certain percentage of your budget.
Good.
That,
We're not allowed to exceed that.
In
We did, we
general
did
fund or in
that.
the reserves?
in the reserves, or do you,
We had to give what was over that amount back to all the towns or all to all the towns. That's what we did one time.
Hmm. It seems odd to me, but
Are there any other funds that go into reserves?
I'm sorry.
Are there any other funds that go into reserves? Is this the
Uh,
only source of funding the reserves?
No, I believe, sir, that's our only way of funding the reserves unless we come to you.
and so, okay, help me understand, what is the number? If you, and I guess you base it at the end of the year, or do you base it each month? Do you look at it each month, or is it at the end of the year that you say, okay, I can only have so much money. I have this much money. I need to give some back to the towns?
You'd almost have to wait until the end of the year to know if it exceeds or not.
Mm-hmm.
Because one month will be different than another month.
And then if you use those reserves, so you use a reserve,
Right.
that brings that amount down.
Right.
Mhm.
What would be an example of how you use the reserves?
We built, the taxpayers built the sheriff's department for $2.5 million that you owed nothing on. That was money that over the years we had put in the capital reserve. We have a reserve for emergency vehicles. In the event one of the cruisers crashes and you have to fight with the insurance company. I don't have my reserves in front of me. We have a reserve for technology. Because Lord knows it only lasts for like, I think 6 months or 2 years, but so we're always trying severance. Anybody that's been an employee or has an employee that's been there for 20 plus years, great employee, cost you when they go, so there's little stuff. And historically in the past, and not even so far in the past, Mary, like maybe 10 years, we would have to come to the budget committee and ask for money to fund any of these reserves because
Because you didn't expect your revenues to be able to fund them enough?
sometimes the revenues don't fund them enough. Just in severance, I think Carrie likes to have like 100. Carrie, can you hear me?
Yep,
Are you-
I can hear you.
You let me just ramble on, hang myself there?
You're doing a great job, Amy.
Yeah. Thanks, Carrie. Yeah. I'm trying to explain to the chairman here the purpose of our reserves and not only how we fund them, obviously, but for certain reserves, we have a level that we like to keep. Like I was trying to say severance, and I don't have it in front of me.
But like unemployment or something?
Well, yeah, severance is unemployment or anything like that, but that particular
Severance goes
reserve,
down.
we
So
like that.
severance covers unemployment, it covers bereavement, buyouts, employee buyouts, and we need at least 150, but we have used more than that at the same time. It also pays for the sign-on bonuses that were approved, correct me, Amy or Betty or Bill, in 2023.
Yeah.
And some of those employees are still receiving sign-on bonuses because they broke it down into when you start, when you complete a year, when you complete 2 years. So severance covers a lot. And if somebody gets done, if somebody retires or they just up and quit, we have sick payouts or vacation payouts. So severance covers all of that.
Another example, grant match. Anybody knows you want to get a grant, you always have to have a little bit of money in the kitty for it. So that is, thank you, Bob. That is how we are able to fund our reserves now and squirrel money away.
I don't want to hold up what we're trying to get through here on the registry of deeds. Are there any other questions about the registry of deeds?
I have a question.
Sure.
I should know it, I probably know it, but. You have two columns, one's the commissioner's request, and one is the department request. You know, they're all the same.
Because for a change, we agreed.
What's that?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's because we agreed. We didn't make any cuts of that.
So they came to you originally.
Yes, everybody, Carrie gets the
And they
budget.
said, we want 255,081.
They come to us first, Herb, and
I can
every
tell you,
single
in my
budget.
43 years of management, that never happened,
Yeah, no,
never.
every department, this department, I think, is probably the same.
Every department in this book is that way.
Yeah, no, that's because we vet through every single, and it's.
So whoever asks you for an amount, you give it to them.
No,
No.
no.
Well, that's my question.
Oh, okay, no, we don't. In
How do
fact,
we
you
know
guys-
what they originally asked?
You folks approved a line or two last week that we had said less,
I know,
but, no,
it they said last two,
no.
No, there was something last week.
but how do we know what they originally asked you for?
There were,
It's the red column.
Yeah.
It's the
That's
department.
what that was my question.
Yeah.
But
I'm
what
sorry.
you're saying is, did the commissioners work with the department heads
Yeah,
and come up with an acceptable
Right.
budget?
Yeah.
And if you think it's acceptable, then your two numbers match. If you don't think it's acceptable,
we
then
make
you've
the
got to.
changes. And this department is probably the one of the tightest departments. The increase is,
but if you go through this book, every single one, the commissioner's request is the same as the other.
There was definitely one last
But
week.
that-
One of them is
There are some. legit
$300, that's or whatever, but we raised it to match it.
Can I
Go
chime
ahead,
in?
Carrie.
Thank you. So, Herb, thanks for the question. I want to just say that the budget process, the department heads all get their spreadsheets and they get those budgets to me. And then the commissioners review all of those budgets, and they met in one day with every single department head reviewing the budgets, going line by line. And I almost feel it was 2 days, but I think it was one full day. In the same way that the department heads are meeting with the budget committee is the same way that they met with the commissioners as well.
Are you satisfied?
No,
No?
but
Well,
I can't see how,
how there's no disagreement?
right,
and perhaps there is, and that would be reflected in the minutes of our meetings, but if it is a vote and two vote one way and one votes the other or whatever, it's still gonna, it's still gonna show in favor.
So if I can try, so it's sort of it's a collaborative and iterative process that you go through, and the department request isn't necessarily the very initial request that you got.
That's right.
Right,
So that's why.
so it could have been different, but,
So it ends up sort of artificially making it look as though you're basically rubber stamping everything that everybody asks
yeah,
for.
no, and I get that, I see where you're going with that. I can assure you that some of our meetings are theatrical.
but we should be able to see that though. I mean, we
No, I
should,
don't, I don't disagree with you, Herb, for transparency purposes, but again, I guess we've tried to keep it clean, keep the book clean and easier to understand. We found that over the years, sometimes less is more. And speaking on behalf of
10% increase, I think that's what it is.
this department is
No,
2.7.
No, in total,
Oh, okay, yes, sir.
that's a big increase,
Yes, sir.
huge increase. And then first meeting, we raised that already.
Hmm.
Town,
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not,
it's a big increase.
but,
Primarily from the
But we
jail.
also did this. in
I
a
mean, but
meeting.
primarily from the jail.
but certainly, yeah.
I've been through budget meetings and
So
Have you been here for plenty of time?
No, I mean, in my personal work, and I've had a time when they said, you come back and you either have a decrease from last year or a resignation letter, one or the other. And I don't see that here. I see just rubber stamp, okay. 10%, 10%.
Robin?
Could we ask that in future, the budget, the department requested is always the very first original request? And not
Absolutely.
anything that would have been amended in
Yeah.
any intermediate.
No, absolutely. I'm
discussions.
sure Carrie can do that. Carrie? Well, she's
You got it.
obviously. Don't worry, we
Looking
just
for you.
volunteered her. Oh,
No, you didn't. I heard you loud and clear.
thank you, Carrie.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other conversations?
So
Go ahead.
I just want to say that last year, we cut a large dollar number from the budget. And I use the term buffer. We cut out some buffer numbers that were in the budget. And it made a difference. We were all hotter than you are last year. Was not a room you wanted to be in last year. And I'm the budget hawk for the city budgets. And I have gone through this twice with a fine tooth comb, looking for pennies and nickels, not dollars. And I have not been able to find, when I went back and looked at last year's history and what we did and the conversations we had last year, we put these department heads through the grill last year. It was not a pretty sight. And I personally feel as if it made a difference. I feel as if we were heard. And that the pencils were a little sharper when they came to budget time this year. And I have not been able to find the amount of things. And last year, my question that I was hot about was, how come it was lockstep from the red column to the blue column? And there were next to no exceptions last year. This year, there are some exceptions.
Where?
Because I know those, like, that's one of the first things I do. You know, I feel your pain. The tax anticipation note last year, what that did.
Yeah.
You know, every town's went up, Belfast went up 24.5%. Insane. We still have a tax anticipation note based on, you know, where the Fed rates are. It's crazy and it's insane. But I feel that I have put on my thrifty, conservative financial hat going through this twice already this year. Doesn't mean I'm right. But I was in your seat last year and just going crazy. And I'm feeling better this year. I'm not making a lot of conversation this year because I feel as if department heads heard us and listened and did the best they could do under the circumstances. There's still inflation. There's still cost of living increases. And God knows it's hard enough to replace or fill jobs. I know they've got a number of jobs that are not full. And there's a limit of what you can cut there because the world has changed in the last few years. So I'm open to anything that you see or anybody wants to bring up. But I'm going to say that I have really gone through this year before we came in here because I had the information this year that I was missing some of last year. And thank you, everybody, for providing that so we could come in prepared. Not saying I'm going to agree with every number as we go down through the rest of the departments, because the really serious departments that we're going to really be talking about are Saturday, not tonight necessarily.
I know, I've been through it, but
So,
you gotta start every department, not
yeah,
just some.
I don't disagree.
When, for our town, it's 27% of our,
Oh, yeah.
and we have 62% of the school, at least 11% for the town. You can only tax your people so much.
Yeah.
And every town's like that.
68% of our people haven't paid their taxes on time this year.
Yeah.
That's the highest ever.
Yeah.
So at some point, you gotta stop. So instead of increasing, we should decrease
Should.
the budget committee. I think it was 6,000 we added on, by a Saturday.
You added $7,742.
That's right. Instead of decreasing, we added. About time we sharpen our pencils.
Well, personally, I disagree with you because I don't think you can say that it's a completely black and white issue and that adding something is automatically irresponsible or
I'm not saying that's
Yeah.
irresponsible.
I mean, like I said, expenses are going up and I think cutting just to cut isn't serving
I find when there's
communities
cookies.
or.
Push them around, there you go. Some cookies, that's right. Those plates.
You brought.
Yeah, right. I grew up in an Italian family, babe. Feed them, feed them.
Well, I guess I would agree that we should somewhere along the line see cuts, but the only way you're gonna make any substantial cuts to this budget is if you cut people.
Amy.
I have a question pertaining to the
Sure.
budget. Has your office been fully staffed in recent years? At the levels that are sufficient?
Yeah, we've been fully staffed. Our newest, well, our part-timer has been there a year and a half. And, we had some change when my deputy retired. And my clerk moved up to deputy, I appointed her. And then Elena actually came from in the county, so she had been with the county for 12 years before I hired her. And she's been with us for 2.
Great. And were your wages suitable for making that hire a year and a half ago?
We had to play with the wages, I will say that. And I know some of them still aren't happy with the wages, so that is something that they're in a union, so they're one of that, but they were, like Elena, she was hired, my clerk, at a higher pay because where she was with the county for 12 years. But if I hired one off the street, it would have been quite low. Starting.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions for registry of deeds 1065?
I mean, I do still think that the microfilming probably has $3,000 to $6,000 of buffer. And if you really want to cut something, it seems like that's a reasonable. But
And your response to that?
I just need the funds to pay my vendor,
right,
you know.
but still,
So if
you know,
it comes to the point where I'm low or getting low, and I mean, where do we get that?
well,
We may be okay for, like I said, I mean, we just don't know year to year.
right, but we're like 3/4 of the way almost through
I
the
mean,
year.
for this
and
year, yes,
used less than half,
but this year,
This
we will
year's
end up with
budget.
probably around 8,000 in there.
so.
But for next year,
We're only dealing with this year.
Well, no, but
it would be cut
so
for
could you
next year, so, and I don't know what next.
refresh my memory again, because since I did
Yeah.
seem to conflate property recordings and transfers with the microfilming. So what exactly is it that we're microfilming here?
All the documents that I record are, by law, they have to be microfilmed.
Okay, so it is.
It's called, the line technically could be called something different. It's been microfilming for years.
Right.
We still do have those documents microfilmed. The vendor takes them electronically and microfilms them for us. But it's the lease of the whole system. So it's all of our printers, our scanners, our receipt printers, our label makers, all of that. And the service and the programming and everything is included for that $3.90 per document. mean, I guess the ultimate thing is they get microfilmed,
And
but
so
it's the whole process.
Go ahead.
was 2022 likely that the year that had, the federal student activity due to, that was, it looks like just short of $43,000.
We had over 15,000 documents. Our really busy year.
Which was probably 2021.
2021, yes. And then 2020, so we stayed, okay, so from 2010 to 2020. We were in the 12,000s. All of those 10 years. 12,398, 12,670. It was always, which is kind of strange, but that's the way it was every year. And then 2021 was a big year. We went over 14,000. And then 2022 went down to 11,712. Last year was our least 9,510. And then this year so far, we're up to up to 7,000. No, we're up by 795 documents right now over what we were last year. And we're at 8,298. So we're gonna be more this year than last year. And next year, you know, it seems like the trend is going the opposite way. And it's starting to increase again. And it may go back to that 12,000 range.
So, I mean, from what you said, it seemed like there was the one year where there was around 14,000.
Yeah.
That was
Our
an aberration.
Yeah.
It was the pandemic.
Yep.
Right. I mean, if we use 12,000 as kind of a reasonable number for volume and then multiplied it by the thing.
I guess, so the average between 2010 and 2020 was 5,477. Exact. If you do that times 390.
48,000, it would mean. 8,000 less.
12,500. I was going to try you that, yeah, 48,750 would be 12,500 documents.
And there is one,
Read up
because I don't have that with me.
I think so.
Yeah,
390.
and there is a storage fee to, like, because they store our microfilm. So there's a fee, and of course, do I have that with me?
And things just slowing down because of the election. People, I'm sure, could easily go back up next year. Good.
I'm thinking it's no more than like $1,200 per year.
And that's a flat fee that's associated. with
It's,
document processing.
no, it can change.
Okay.
It can change, but I think that's what it's been around without looking it up. So. I mean, so, I mean. We brought it to 52,000 or something. Just to
I don't know.
give us a little bit of. And see how next year goes and go from there.
I don't know.
No.
12, you did 12.5 times 393? Is that what you just did?
390. I used 390.
And you multiply it by 12,005
Yeah,
and you got what?
48,750.
And you just said 1,200?
Yeah. I think it's probably around.
Which would bring it to right around 50,000.
Mm-hmm.
So
My number.
Can you give us 8? 6, I'm sorry, can you give us 6,000 out of that?
I mean,
Yeah, and if that doesn't work,
We
can
can
you,
try.
can you use your reserves to fill the gap?
I mean, I'm not anticipating us being. Getting, but
right.
it's gonna go up more than each year, I think.
Well,
Until it
and
gets to that.
you expect the amount to still be 390.
But we, right, so we figure, right.
Okay.
Right.
Have they,
Yes,
have
that's
they
right.
raised prices at all on your fees?
That's a good question. We actually are working on a bill for 2025, that if it goes through and we have we're in the beginning stages. We have it kind of put out what we want to ask for. But we're getting the board, and that's gonna go for 2025, and if it passes, it would be effective January 2026. And it's going with a flat rate recording fee instead of the 22 for the first page, 2 for each additional. And transfer tax would stay the same, but it would increase our revenue by a lot.
But that's for 26.
But it's for 2026.
Yeah. And so
That's something in-
I had a
but
question,
we
a
don't-
question for the commissioners. If we cut your budget to 50 on this item and you exceed 50 in 2025, can you use your reserves to cover the difference?
I mean, obviously we could. What would happen is her budget would come in the negative. That line would be negative. You know, at the end of the year, and then, you know, you balance the books however you can. I mean, she wouldn't go without, paying her vendors and such.
All right. So, Mary, I heard.
I'm gonna
you,
make a
say
motion that we
50.
change the number to 50,000.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? A motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. So that changes.
The bottom line to 249,081.00. 249,081.00. $249,081. Yes,
Okay, do we have a motion for this budget center?
I will make that as a motion.
Okay, do we have a second? Second. Motion and second, any discussion? All in favor? All right, so budget center number 1065 Registry of Deeds is approved by the Budget Committee for 249,081. 081.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you. Thank you. All right,
Thank you, Herb.
so let's talk about the comm center. Budget center 1076.
Who's gonna be the first one to ask about shift differentials?
Please do. 'Cause I'm sorry, my department does not generate money. What would you like to know about shift differentials?
Why there 10 times what we would like to do? 20 times? What happened? Is it
That's
because
what
of
they-
personal shortages?
Nope,
So-
we renegotiated the union contract this year. And that's what the union negotiated with the commissioners.
It's tough enough, folks, you all know that, to get help, let alone staff a 24-hour facility that's gotta have somebody sitting at a computer. So, we learned from all the other 24-hour staffing agencies that you have to pay a little different, little more. If it's after hours or weekends or, you know, what have you.
Well,
And there actually is a discrepancy in the shift differentials. Because when we negotiated, when I did the budget, they were in the middle of negotiating a contract. And so my shift differentials are actually $3,510 short. Because it's actually more than what I originally thought it was gonna be when they actually ratified the contract.
So you're saying 17,000 and stuff plus 3,000 and whatever?
Yeah, 3510. And I have the language here in the contract, if you folks want to read that at all.
But I still don't understand why, okay, so why are we then budgeting around 17,000 when we actually spent 265,000?
What do you mean?
There's,
So,
Spent it last year.
so what happened
2023.
what happened with that is the way, and maybe Carrie can help me with this one, because I'm gonna say this wrong, but instead of it just coming out of a differential line, it was coming out their salary plus the differential out of that line. So the base salary was also included in that line,
Geez.
which has now been split out from that line. Is that right, Carrie?
That is correct.
Okay.
Oh, I see, in the full-time where it's
Mhm.
like 9,900,000 versus 600. Okay.
Yeah, that's why.
It's like, what's going on? Okay, thanks for pointing that out.
Yep.
I didn't see that.
So my biggest increase is personnel because of the contract. That's up almost 12% from last year. Everything else, I was able to cut very minimal from certain lines. If we were to go into the contractual, the 4,000s. Travel expenses, because of most everything comes out of my training line now. The travel expenses, I was able to reduce that down. I believe I brought that down to 500. The vehicle maintenance I had to bring up because the vehicle I have will need tires this year. Other things are staying the same.
I have a question about the radio maintenance.
Yes,
Okay, so it looks like you entered into a contract for radio maintenance.
correct.
So, I mean, just looking at the numbers, so you've got 4,600 and 4,605, and I'm looking at the two of those and the contract. Is 60, is a contract, you believe that contract is 72,000 for 2025?
So I have two different contracts. One is with a company called ComSearch. That's $500. That protects our FCC licensing.
Mm-hmm.
So that one, if something happens, someone tries to get a radio frequency that we already have and it's going to have interference, they will notify us so we can take care of that through our radio vendor. The maintenance for 2025 is a 3-year maintenance. That is 71,556.69. And that includes all of our warranties for all of the new equipment. So that's all your upgrades, that's firmware upgrades. This also has the radio company comes out once a year, goes to every one of our tower sites, goes right through the system, does any upgrades it needs, cleans it, and take care of it.
So, yeah, so then why do also we need radio maintenance at $10,000?
Yep, so that's one that I decreased but the radio maintenance covers, so I just had a rectifier go up at the tower site in Liberty, had to do with a lightning strike. So that's not covered by a maintenance agreement, it's only for failures that are because the equipment failed because of manufacturer or wear and tear, et cetera.
Not covered by insurance?
It was such a small amount because it was a $1,500 item to
Okay.
replace. So that had to come out of my budget somewhere. All the headsets that I use for the dispatchers come out of that radio maintenance budget. I think that's about it right now.
So, I mean, I'm looking at the two together.
Yep.
And what I was wondering if we could shave $5,000 off of radio repair maintenance. Because you've got almost everything else covered by a radio maintenance contract.
Yep. And I've only used 40% of that this year, so.
Could we knock $5,000 off?
Yep, I would be happy with one more thousand in my favor, but that's a safeguard, but yeah.
4,600 account.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Let's talk about training too.
Okay.
While we're at it, because that was another one that I saw that I thought you know, what we spent year to date compared to what you're asking for seems a little high, and I was wondering if you could talk about that.
So last year you cut that from 15 to 13. And right now I'm at 54%, but I also have I have a training coming up in November that I've got 6 people going to. And I also have one dispatcher that's gonna be at the academy for most of the month of December. So that's gonna almost exhaust that line right now.
So you think you're gonna spend the 13
Pretty darn close,
this
yeah.
year?
I know that the conference is another 2,000. And then whatever I have for mileage for that dispatcher going back to the academy for the month of December.
And what is your capital outlay for?
That was for the policy program that I asked for last year. And it was asked that I put it back in this year. That's so it's the same program the sheriff's department uses. So we write all of our policies in it. And then if there's a change in the policy, it automatically gets notified to the dispatchers.
So it's like a software program that you pay for?
Correct.
Through capital outlay?
Yes.
Okay. So,
And it's doubled. Basically.
Yeah, they had an increase on it.
So for clarity, my notes from last year were that, again, these lines that aren't named exactly what they are.
Right.
But 4605, the radio maintenance contract,
Yes.
that I've got a note last year that was actually the towers. And that's.
So, yes, that's the equipment that's at the tower. So we have several towers throughout the county that we just put in from grant money. All brand new equipment, new antennas, all the way down to the ground. So that's what that's covering.
any other questions from the committee?
So that radio maintenance and it's a contracted amount.
It is, yes.
72 for next year.
You said 3 years?
That's 1 year.
Or 1 year.
Yeah, so I don't know if you have all the notes that I had, but that's. So next year, that would be at 72,213. I've got it's a 5-year broken out, but I'm asking for it each year.
Got it.
So far, I've suggested a reduction of 5,000 in the radio maintenance.
So. Can I go back to line 3,200, the
Sure.
differentials where you said that the number here is short, it's incorrect.
It is,
And it
yes,
should be $3,510 higher.
correct.
Which would make that number 20,692.
Right.
On 3,200 shift differential, it should really be 20,692.
Can you say that number again?
20,692.
Thank you.
So where are we now?
Well,
Are you
we
making a
added-
motion?
we added that back into this column.
Right.
So now we're at your statement about how do we feel about 4,600 radio repair maintenance and reducing that by $5,000.
I am curious if we can have any kind of balance sheet for the reserve accounts. And whether there would be a reserve account associated with the communication center that would provide for, capital repairs or outlay that would be otherwise rolled into this.
And there, Bob, you have the sheet. I don't even have my sheet.
I got your sheet.
Oh,
There is a
We don't
Hi.
have-
There is a communication equipment reserve line that I believe has $90,000 in it.
So for a $1,500 rectifier or something like that.
communication equipment, Gary, as of 7/31. This is an old sheet. I've got 51,425.
We received grant funds back, and so we replenished that, so it brings it back up to 90,000.
90,000.
And while we're on that subject, I thought I'd asked in the last meeting, but apparently I didn't, but can we get a new reserve balance?
What I'd like to do, I'd like to have that a topic of our next meeting, the reserves. And,
Okay.
and so let's add that to our agenda for next meeting, if that's okay with everybody. And go over the reserves. I'd like to know exactly what the reserves are, how they're incremented, how they're decremented, and what they're there for.
Yeah.
And that, you know, and then that'll give us a better understanding. You know, I was kind of hinting around about the reserves earlier. But I agree with you.
Yeah, well, when we had
Robin.
a similar discussion last year about the reserves, and you gave us this sheet last year where the balance was through October 4th. That's the only
No,
sheet.
no, and I
have now.
apologize, and Carrie had tried to gather all the paperwork she
That's okay.
could, but she didn't have the update, we don't
Yeah.
have the updated sheets either, but no, you're absolutely right.
So if we've
But-
got equipment reserves, reserves for equipment, why do we need to have an equipment maintenance line when we could take it out of the reserve?
Your
Well-
maintenance is annual, your reserves are.
For whatever comes up.
Or for things like we under budgeted, you know, we did our best guess.
Hmm.
Yeah, that is what it
Right,
is.
you don't
I mean,
want
you
to-
don't want to not budget. for
You don't want to
something because
completely
we have a reserve.
depreciate
No.
your
Because you
reserves.
deplete your
Deeply,
reserve.
yeah.
You
We
know,
don't
but
wanna over budget.
Something might come up.
Right, the point of,
You don't want to be reserve rich.
right, like
Right.
when you'd mentioned
Right.
how earlier when you said, and then the budget is negative, it's like, but that's actually not a terrible thing.
right,
You know, and
Yeah.
that is why we have reserves. We're just, if we're really trying to be as accurate as we can be, you know, sometimes we underestimate what we're gonna have, and that's
Certainly.
okay. It's not,
That,
you know,
that's fine.
it's
That's
better
what-
than thinking everything's gotta have a cushion built.
yep, no,
Yeah.
Fine, as
absolutely.
long as we don't do just the opposite and say, oh, we'll cushion it a little,
Mhm.
just in case. Well,
Right.
that's what the reserve's for.
Right,
Right.
Yeah.
right.
So
so-
I'd like to add something about our reserves. It's not just reserves, because you have restricted reserves, which are designed for a specific purpose, in which we have verbiage and what those can be used for. We have active reserves, and we have our capital reserves. I will provide you prior to the next meeting the actual documentation and verbiage and what those reserves can be used for. I'd also like to state that by statute, which I just read recently, we have to report to the state of Maine what those reserves can be used for. And if there's going to be any changes to those, we also have to let the state know. So while I understand that towns and municipalities are different in their reserves, the county is different on how we can use those reserves, and we're restricted by the intent or the purpose for those. So I hear you talking a lot about the reserves, and I just use a lot of caution. And I'd hate to go down a road where the county gets in trouble, where we're using reserves for an unintended purpose and not properly notifying the state of any changes. I just don't want to change the intent of the original purpose of those reserves.
But that's why we want to have the verbiage on the reserves
Yeah.
to let us know what they're all about, how they're incremented and decremented.
Okay, we will work on that.
Okay.
Thank you, Carrie.
So
You're
now
welcome.
we're sitting here with this budget. Mary, you want to increase the shift differentials by 35.10?
Well, that's what the reality seems to be.
Yes,
And so that makes that number 20,692.
Right. And I want to decrease the radio maintenance
4,600 line,
yeah,
3,600 by 5,000.
okay? So that would give us a new total for
Oh,
this.
so I
this.
suppose,
Did we vote?
I suppose we ought to make a motion on that? Is it,
Are those the only two lines everybody?
unless anybody else has any other? Okay,
I'd like to make a motion that we reduce line 4,600 radio repair maintenance by $5,000, so it would now read $5,000.
right,
9.
no,
No.
Oh,
5.
I wrote it on the wrong
Yeah,
one.
five.
And you make the motion to increase,
Let's do a
The shift-
vote, let's do a vote on that one first.
okay, so we got a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Okay. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Let's do a second one.
Now I would like to make a motion that on line 3,200 shift differentials, we increase the number listed, which was 17,182, and we add $3,510 as informed by the department head. So this line would now be a total of $20,692, which is the real number.
Yes.
Okay, we've got a motion on the table. Do we have a second? And we've got a second. Any discussion? All in favor? All right.
So the new total for this line, this department, here we go, it's a long number.
Okay.
1,361, 484.19. Should I read it again?
1,361,484.19.
Yes.
Okay, so Mary's made a motion that we approve this budget center. I'm presuming that's what you're making a motion.
Yes.
1075 for a total of 1,361,484.19. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay. Thank you
Thank you very much.
It's 1076, isn't it?
Yes,
Yeah.
1076.
Yes,
May I ask who seconded the motion before this last one?
Oh.
It was a male
Herb.
voice. Thank you. Okay, thanks.
okay. So that concludes the work for tonight.
Wait a minute.
That's good. And so that leaves us with, what does that leave us with? For Saturday, the jail,
Big
the sheriff,
Duties.
Big ones are
The-
fun.
you know, the jail, the sheriff, and
DA.
EA.
Oh, and facilities.
Yes.
Facility,
Yeah.
yeah,
District Attorney, Facilities, Jail, Sheriff.
Every duty.
right. And so that's on a Saturday at 9. I
Yes.
also would like to discuss the reserve.
No.
Not this
Next-
Saturday.
no.
Not the
26th.
26th.
Yeah.
I'd also like to discuss the reserves like we talked about, so the budget committee has a better understanding of how they work.
Would it be helpful if Carrie emailed that information
Yes.
to folks ahead of time?
Yes, yes.
Carrie, you heard that?
Yes, I did, and I plan on doing that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So any other items that the committee might want to discuss now?
If we have flexibility in timing, I'd suggest that we have the reserve discussion at the beginning of the meeting.
That's fine with me.
If there is flexibility with department heads that are set to be there.
Can we do that, Barb?
I'd have to check with them. The only reason I ask is because we had sent out a kind of
Yeah,
an
right,
agenda.
Well, if we don't, then we can do it at the end. That's, but it'll help us understand
That's
how
gonna
things
be
fit
the heavy
together.
duty full schedule day
Is.
with a lot of conversation.
But you're gonna have that information ahead of time too, to kind
We
of,
will.
feel free to ask questions to any of us.
Right.
So you could handle it if it was at the end.
Yeah, that would.
Kind of lined everybody up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
A certain-
I mean, I'd prefer it at the beginning, but that's okay. As long as we get it in and as long as we understand, because the final numbers don't happen until
Right.
November, whatever it is.
November 6th.
6th, day after the election,
Yes.
What time does it start on Saturday?
9 o'clock.
And who is the first one?
We have District Attorney followed by Facilities, then the jail, and then the sheriff. Facilities has to speak to all of them.
So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, we have a second. Got a second? Buddy.